Tony Sherba. I'm going to be talking about Stoicism, so sharing some ancient wisdom today. One of the great things about Stoicism is that there are a bunch of really fun quotes. So this is a quote from a Stoic, one of the leaders of leaders or great thinkers, you would call it, of Stoicism, which his name is Marcus Aurelius. You might know him from Gladiator as being the good emperor before the bad emperor that causes all the problems in that movie. But known more historically as one of the great Stoic writers. Stoicism is an ancient philosophy, and there is a lot of kind of misconceptions about it in current day. So what a lot of people think is Stoicism is about being like a warrior and going into battle. That's not Stoicism. Obviously it's ancient. There was a lot of really brutal battles and things, and so there's a part of the philosophy about that, but certainly not the tenet of it. And then even the definition, like a dictionary definition of Stoic, is a little bit incorrect. So it's you think of like a Ron Swanson character or something like that. That's pretty just impervious to emotion and things things like that, which is there are aspects of that in Stoicism, but that's not really the definition of Stoicism. So as I was looking this up, this is actually more like Stoicism, which is it's about maintaining a bit of calmness and reflectiveness as you approach different situations. So obviously this is a kind of joke. Again, there's going to be a lot of really fun quotes. So this is from one of the another famous Stoic writer, Epictetus. I think I'm saying that right. But he actually was a slave, and then became not royalty, but just a well-regarded figure in ancient Rome. And so this was sort of some of his reflections, and this is really kind of more quintessential Stoicism. The podium in the prison is the same place, one high, one low, but in either place, your freedom of choice can be maintained if you so wish. So really kind of a state of mind type of thing. So in short, what is Stoicism? It's an ancient philosophy, and there's three main disciplines in Stoicism. There's the discipline of perception, so how you view the world and how you how you see things. Attitude is 90% of everything. That's kind of more or less the philosophy there. Discipline of action, so knowing when to take action and taking the correct action. And then discipline of will, so persistence and the ability to continue on when things might be difficult, is the other discipline. I really like this quote. I won't read it, but basically it's about it's about sort of a state of mind, right? And accepting fate. Things happen. You might have a runny nose. You wouldn't say, oh, I need to I hope somebody fixes my runny nose. You'd wipe it. So getting into Stoicism a little bit more. There's, and I'm taking this from a couple different places, but really there's kind of like 5 steps. So self-control to overcome your emotions is sort of like foundational. As this goes into perception. So, again, like where we talked about being overly emotional, this is where, Stoics will remain calm and, accept that certain things are happening, take stock of their emotions, and, maintain. And then step 2, become clear and unbiased. Our emotions can oftentimes make our thinking unclear. And so if you are able to remain unbiased, then you can see more reason. And so in Stoic philosophy, there's this concept of logos, which is like universal reason, which also has ties into Buddhism and things like that, where there's a kind of just a universal understanding of the way the world works, and you can only do that by maintaining a clear mind. So, and then once you start understanding reason, to go to the next step is a focus on improving your ethical and moral well-being. So, really working on the ways that you make decisions and the things that you do to fit in with that, universal reason of the way the world works. As you get deeper into the understanding reason, it's being in agreement with nature and being in agreement with other people as an extension of that. We generally don't want to be fighting. The world works in certain ways, and we want to work with it, not against it. And that's where it gets into the definition of the dictionary definition of Stoic, which is unemotional. But if you're able to accept the things around you and work in harmony with nature and the things around you, you can be more free from anger, envy, and jealousy. So it kind of is as Stoics would do, in a logical pattern, working through the philosophy. So another great Stoic thinker and writer is Seneca. This resonated with me a lot. As people here know, I like going on hikes, but this is just a reminder to observe nature and be in it, and let your mind wander sometimes, so that you can kind of come back to that universal reason. So getting into a little bit more of the the history and and the who and what and how of Stoicism. So Stoic thinking, what we call Stoicism, started in the 350 AD or BC, and it kind of went up until about 200 300 AD. So it was kind of around the time of the Roman Empire, and people were, a lot of ideas were being shared at that time, and a lot of people were writing things down. As looking at the history of the world, there's a lot of really interesting Stoic thinking and philosophy that happened in this time. The world then goes through the Dark Ages, which is, there wasn't a lot of writing and philosophy. And then in a world history sense, we come into the Enlightenment in the mid 1000s. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of years now, but coming into the 20th century. And then in the Enlightenment, a lot of what happened is a lot of people started revisiting some of these ancient texts and thinking about it. So when we look at the Enlightenment and we look at Stoicism, there's a very clear line between Stoic thinking and the thinking of the Enlightenment, which we'll talk about a little bit more as well. So I have a tome of Stoic literature here. There's I haven't read all of these in full disclosure. I've read about 1.5 of these in full, but then I've referenced some of the other ones, especially in like making this presentation. So the three people that are most often quoted, and I've used some of their quotes in here, are Seneca. And so like this is a super influential like Stoic text. It's letters from a Stoic. One of the earlier thinkers of Stoicism, really around the 0 mark, like the 0 year mark. And so it's really interesting reading some of these things. Obviously they've been translated from Latin, but it's how relevant they are because they're just talking really about like being in harmony with nature and like the way that you think. So Seneca is one of them. Again, Epictetus, I think is his name, but he was a slave that rose in prominence and was also like a really like deep thinker. He was the guy who had that quote with the wipe your own nose type of thing. And then this is the one I've been working through right now. It's from Marcus Aurelius. He was the emperor of Rome, and he went around and wrote a bunch of letters to himself that ended up getting passed along to people. And it's like, the forward to this book is like amazingly interesting. It's, these letters that this, Roman emperor wrote to himself ended up getting passed down through, all of these generations, and then like kind of resurfaced, sometime in like, 1200, almost 1,000 years after he wrote it, like resurfaced, and then like people started, talking about it and copying them and all that stuff, like no printing press. I mean, people were like, copying it. So it's just really amazing, like reading something like this and being like, oh wow, this is 2,000 years old, so it's, and, just really, a Roman emperor talking in like pretty real terms about just like how he deals with like, managing himself and managing how he sees the world and like, his relationships with people and things like that. So super interesting. There's a whole bunch of other like Stoic people, but if you look up like Stoic quotes and things like that, I mean, those are the main three people. So some Stoic influences throughout history, and I touched on this a little bit. Christianity is actually like very heavily influenced by Stoicism. If you look on the timeline, Christianity started in arguably like around 0, and then around 300 really started rising in prominence in the Roman Empire, and they borrowed a lot of things from Stoics. And the next slide I'll explain a little bit more about that. Then, like I mentioned, the world went into the Dark Ages, and it resurfaced in the Enlightenment. One of the biggest things that came out of the Enlightenment is democracy. So a lot of the founding fathers of the United States were avid readers of Stoic texts. Thomas Jefferson died with this book on his nightstand, and George Washington had, I think, carried with him Marcus Aurelius's text. So just like really, really interesting stuff. And the philosophy of coming into harmony with other people and with the world, really spurred like, everyone is created equal. We're all like, same. So it's, really super interesting. Stoicism also embraces failure. So inventors like Edison have credited Stoic thinking to their success. Amelia Earhart, persevered against pretty great odds to be the first woman to fly across the Atlantic, and has some Stoic thoughts on that. Has mentioned Stoic things in her memoirs, I guess. And then all sorts of presidents throughout the history of the United States have read Stoic literature and been examples of Stoicism. I'll talk about Abraham Lincoln a little bit more in the future. And then obviously, well, Winston Churchill's not the president, obviously, but yeah. So mentioning like Christianity and some of like, again, like self-discipline, which is a big thing in Christianity, is there, but this is a serenity prayer. It's not really necessarily a Christian prayer, but this is like very kind of quintessential Stoic. So I mentioned like the three main disciplines of Stoicism before, and just to kind of dig into each of those and kind of break those down a little bit. And I'll be honest, like this book is a modern book written by a fellow named Ryan Holiday, and so I'm kind of borrowing his outline of this that he puts in this book. So discipline of perception, it's recognizing that you have the power to understand that the way that you're perceiving the world, steadying yourself, controlling your emotions, really thinking unbiasedly, as we talked about before, trying to alter your perspective, like think in different ways, and then understand what's going on in the present moment and find an opportunity. So the picture I put up here is Nelson Mandela. So Nelson Mandela who ended up becoming the president of South Africa, the first black president of South Africa. He got put in jail, early on, and he ended up actually like taking that situation of being imprisoned and made it kind of his office, and really where he could really start to work on a framework for ending apartheid. So he could have very easily just been like, oh, I'm in prison, this sucks, right? But it changed his perspective or his perception. Good quote, Teddy Roosevelt. This guy wrote The Great Gatsby. So getting into like discipline of action. So it's really about taking action and like stepping into the arena and getting into it. Something like being persistent about it. Something that we work on all the time is iteration. There's a ton of iteration that we want to do. We're never going to get it right the first time. Following a process, doing it right, really using obstacles to your advantage. So when an obstacle comes in, understand that, this book is titled "The Obstacle is the Way." Use that obstacle to, bounce off of and improve. And then, channeling your energy and embracing failure. I put a light bulb here. Thomas Edison, again, like influenced by Stoicism. I think he's quoted as saying like he worked on the light bulb for like years, and when right before he did it, he was just like, I figured out 1,000 ways not to build this, as he went through that process of inventing, until he actually came up with it. If he'd not embraced failure, he would have never invented the light bulb. So getting into discipline of will, which is like one of the really most important parts of Stoicism, is building an inner strength. So really having resolve. Like we've talked about before, accepting fate, anticipating people will be negative towards you if you are going to make something happen. Then embrace what does happen, right? Like everything, things happen, and if it's a failure, understand that you're going to be able to learn from that failure and take that as something that you can embrace. Again, perseverance. Appreciate that a major part of Stoicism as well is looking at the world and realizing how small you are in it. And so it's often easy to forget, but basically hey, this thing's been going on for 2,000 way more than 2,000 years. We're here for a very short amount of time. The trials, the small trials and tribulations that we're dealing with right now are very inconsequential in terms of, our entire lifespan and the things that we're working on. And so it's the perspective of that being able to say, hey, this too shall pass, is really like a very Stoic philosophy. So, again, this is, Christianity, Proverbs. And then just wanted to make shout to that book, because I'm totally using a lot of the structure and framework that it lays out in this. It's an awesome book. I mean, it actually, my friend gave me this book, 2 years ago, and I read kind of bits and pieces of it for a while, and it was just really, it was really awesome. Just going through it, especially running a business, having things happen. You feel like things are super dramatic and all this stuff, and then you realize, there's ways of thinking about getting through some of those things. Really quickly, I just want to go back. I didn't talk about Abraham Lincoln and the discipline of will. Abraham Lincoln led the United States through the Civil War, the greatest challenge of any president. Abraham Lincoln, very specifically, and I after reading this book, I read the biography of Abraham Lincoln, because I just found it so interesting and compelling, the way that he thought about things. Abraham Lincoln had his mom died when he was young. He was born poor. He had his children of his died a lot. His wife kind of went crazy because his children died while he was going through managing the Civil War. And so a lot of people describe Lincoln as having a lot of melancholy, but what at least what Stoics would attribute to his success in doing that is he had experiences growing up throughout his life where he was able to say this shall pass. I will be able, I have to accept this fate, and I need to operate and get things done. And I mean, he was able to actually, look at certain things that were going on and push his agenda even further. The Emancipation Proclamation was unheard of really before the war. But he believed that all men are created equal, and he wanted to push he strategically pushed that agenda in a war, and he timed it very appropriately to make that move to his advantage, and I mean, I could go into, maybe that'll be my next Civil War stuff. But it was, I don't know, super interesting. I mean, and it's really attributed to his ability to accept fate and work off of it. So there's a website called thedailystoic.com. This is their quick steps to Stoic practice. You can check it out if you want to do that. And then I will leave with this quote, which I think is kind of quintessential Stoicism. So that, I will say, displace any obstacles in your way, and turn roadblocks into roads. Thank you.